I'm a big basketball fan and a big college basketball fan, so I'm familiar with Marcus Smart, who is considered one of the top prospects for the 2014 NBA draft and plays basketball for the Oklahoma State University Cowboys. In a game against Texas Tech University on February 8, 2014, Smart didn't make headlines for his play on the court, however. He made headlines for his interaction with the fan in the stands. This is what happened.
Marcus Smart runs into the crowd, falls in. As he goes to get up, he turns and pushes. Right there. That's an easy call. An easy call. That's disgusting behavior. Disgusting.
So that fan was identified as Texas Tech superfan Jeff Orr later. Originally, as I first heard about this, the media was calling this a stain on the sport of basketball, and even as it was happening, the announcers called it, quote, disgusting behavior. Then, we started to learn more information about what actually happened at that event. There was an eyewitness who said that Marcus Smart came off the court telling his coaches that he was called a racial slur by Jeff Orr. This changed the entire outlook of the event. The media started portraying it more favorably towards Smart. Black coaches in college basketball and the NBA made statements about it. While they did not necessarily approve or agree with Smart's actions, they understood. So, why did Marcus Smart shove a fan in the stands? At first, it was thought that it was just a senseless, stupid act by Smart, but it became much more understandable as we learned more about the language used in the event. As we learned more about the language used, the media became more sympathetic, and Smart was no longer viewed as the aggressor. Smart issued an apology, stating, quote, I want to apologize to the fan, my teammates, my coach. This is not how I condone myself. I just can't let that happen again. Even though Smart took responsibility, many still thought that it was Jeff Orr's fault that this incident had happened. So how can language affect our actions? Well, language can affect our emotions, which then in turn can affect our actions. But then, how does a change in language lead to a change in attitude about an event? And how does this change of emotion caused by language affect our attitude? How does the language used affect the way we view past events? That's the knowledge issue that I will be examining. So, first, it's necessary to define language before we can discuss it further. For these purposes, the definition of language is any way something is described, with words, pictures, verbally, or non-verbally. So one view of history is that it's fact. It does not change. It's set in stone. The events happened the way they happened, regardless of how you describe them. Describing them doesn't actually change the events. It only changes how they're described. So words do not change the events themselves, only the way that we can perceive them. However, history is written by the victors, so whatever narrative that the victors tell is what we perceive happened. The language of the victors can help shape our ideas about certain events. So language can affect the way we perceive an event, but it doesn't actually change what happened in the event. So that's pretty smart. Going back to the events on the basketball court on February 8th, 2014. So the events didn't change as we learned more information about the language used, but the people's reactions to those events changed. So now many say that he should not have been given a 3-game suspension that he was given for the interaction with the fan. So even though the events didn't change, what we know about the language used made people change their perceptions about the event, even though nothing had actually changed in that event. When I think about the Boston Massacre, I think of professionally trained soldiers firing upon and killing multitudes of unarmed, innocent, helpless civilians. In reality, only 5 colonists were killed in the Boston Massacre. After colonists taunted the British soldiers and incited them by throwing snowballs and even shouting "fire" to encourage the soldiers to fire on the crowd. Calling this event a massacre distorted my perception of events. In Britain, it wasn't called a massacre. It was called the incident on King Street, where a massacre is defined as the violent killing of many people. An incident is defined as an unexpected and unpleasant thing that happens. Simply the words used to describe the same event changed my perception of that event. So on the left is the colonists' view of the Boston Massacre, with the British soldiers firing on unarmed colonists, where on the right is the British depiction of the incident on King Street, where the colonists are attacking the British soldiers. Even though it's the same event, the different names of the event and the language used change our perceptions of the event. Language does not change the facts, it changes how we feel about the facts. So, in the Marcus Smart incident, there are the same facts of the event that happened, but the different language used to describe it makes us have a different understanding of the events, and more compassion towards Marcus Smart because we know of the language that was used now. But that's not the only thing that affects it. Bias also affects what we believe about language, and how that language affects you. So what we hear on a daily basis creates our biases. We become desensitized to some language and more sensitized to other language. And where we live can affect our biases. And our biases don't only relate to race relations, but also things such as LGBT rights, gender bias, and socioeconomic bias. In this case, a bias that exists lies in what team you're rooting for. So Texas Tech fans would be more likely to defend Jeff Orr in this instance, whereas Oklahoma State fans are more likely to defend Marcus Smart. Another kind of bias that is extremely important in this instance is historical bias. And again, the aspect that history is written by the victors comes up. Can we ever really know the true history of events if the victors write the history? It then becomes one word against another, and those words affect how we perceive historical events. Even the words themselves can make a huge difference. Even the word choice of just one word can make a huge difference. For instance, massacre in the Boston Massacre, inciting images of senseless slaughter instead of just an incident that makes it seem like an inconvenience. Another example is patriots versus traitors. Even though they describe the same group of people, patriots are revered, pun intended, while traitors are ostracized. One word is much more positive than the other, even though they're describing the same people. So, back to the knowledge issue. How does language change how we view past events? It does not change the actual facts of the event, but it does change how we perceive those events. One word can make a huge difference in how we perceive an event. That racial slur that Jeff Orr said to Marcus Smart changed the entire public mindset about the incident. People may not agree with what Marcus Smart did, but because of the language used and the understanding of that language used, they now have a level of understanding about why Marcus Smart did what he did. And that is pretty smart.